Hi guys, I'm very excited to be here and participate in JS Vid conference. And I'm here to tell you some interesting stuff about scalable view graphics, or as some of you already got from it, I'm going to talk mostly about SVGs, scalable vector graphics, in relations to Vue.js framework. So let's dive directly in. I assume that most of you used SVGs before, and by my fake meter down there, at least 92% of you used SVGs. And I can assume that most of you used SVGs for icons. I mean, you can create icons with SVGs, and you can even animate them. So one cool resource for that is Lottie files, which is a huge resource where you can find free and paid vector graphics, especially animated icons. You should definitely check that out. So some of you used SVGs for other stuff except of icons. And for example, is graphics and illustrations. So, I mean, you're creating a website, you need some cool backgrounds, you want them to be scalable, so probably you will use some SVGs. Or you want to enrich your content, so you will probably use SVGs for that. Another great resource for that is Humans, which is spelled a little bit differently, as you can see in the bottom of the screen. It's a big resource where you can get parts of illustrations and just combine them with different poses, different colors, etc., and just use them freely on your creations and websites. So the question is, who used SVGs for other stuff? I mean, except icons and graphics. I assume that not a lot of you. So what I'm saying here is that using SVG for only those two things is only scratching the surface of this amazing format and what it can give to you. Quickly about me. I'm Dima, hi, and I do a lot of stuff. So one of them is leading the Vue.js Israel community. The other is I'm a front-end architect. That's my actual profession. And except of that, I do a lot of stuff, as I said. One of the cool ones is I'm mentoring at hackathons. So if you search for the hackathon mentor hashtag in social networks, you'll probably find a lot of pictures and stuff that I participated in. Okay. The first place we encounter SVGs in relation to Vue is actually directly in the Vue documentations. There is a nice article there by Sarah Dresner, which shows how to, or suggests how to use SVG icon system directly inside Vue. You should definitely check that out if you didn't see it yet. And of course, we can just copy the SVG contents directly inside our Vue files, or we can use tools like Vue SVG Loader that uses Webpack, and it just loads the files for us, which is great because we are developers. Using SVG as a Vue component feels very, very natural. That's one of the reasons that I really like using SVGs in combination with Vue. And those two technologies are, in my opinion, and not only in my opinion, are the perfect match. So, of course, Vue supports SVGs out of the box. And the second cool thing is, because SVG is XML based, you can just apply directly Vue's reactivity on the SVG code. Okay, so wait a minute. Is this going to be a talk about how we should use SVG in Vue? I mean, how we should import it with Webpack or use SVG with symbols and use? Well, no. This is going to be mostly about what? I mean, what can we do with SVGs? And why we should use it more. What I'm saying is, I'm a front-end developer, and probably you are too. So, as I see on the web, in the past, at least, I don't know, 10 or more years, people not using SVG enough. Here's a nice example. So, this is a cool illustration of avocados, and the person who created them, Julie Park, created them with HTML and CSS. And it looks amazing. There is a slight animation on the background. And it's cool. It can be done, of course. And the question is, why should I do it with HTML and CSS? No particular reason in this specific case, because I could just draw it in whatever vector graphic program and then quickly animate it with the same CSS bits as Julie did. What I'm saying is, yes, we can do everything with HTML and CSS. Everything can be achieved. Everything that we can make with SVG definitely can be done with HTML and CSS. As you can see in the next illustrations, so on the right there is an SVG, animated SVG, and on the left it's just HTML and CSS, and they look the same. The question is why? Okay, so this is a statement. SVG is one of the most powerful technologies available on the web. It's so powerful, for in this specific example, there is a company called Loading.io. And if I remember correctly, those are a couple of guys from Taiwan, and they actually making money directly from SVG. They have this cool builder when you can play around with sliders and stuff and create your background animation of SVG. And you can download it in a GIF format, SVG format, PNG or whatever. But when you want to download the SVG, the live SVG format, you actually need to pay money, you need to buy it. So it's just making money of SVG. It's amazing. Let's talk what can we make with SVG. Okay, so we can show emotions with SVG. In this specific example, on this website called Emotive Fields, we see a pretty big list of emotions, and when you hover it with your mouse, so you get a very nice animation that made with SVG that illustrates that specific emotion. The next thing is we can do 3D with SVG. Well, not exactly 3D because SVG is flat, so we can't do actual 3D with SVG. But there is a very interesting framework called ZDog with a 3Z and with the 3Zs. And what it does, it allows you to write SVG in a very simple way. You create the 3D models with components, and then when it comes to rendering it on your screen, so it's just like the engine behind it, it just flattens it and imitates SVG on your on a flat plane. There is actual, except of that library, there is a Vue plugin that works with that library, and it's really easy to create very cool and simple 3D animations and 3D objects with ZDog. We can build design systems. I mean, almost full design systems, as you can see in this specific example. So we have these Shiba dogs, and behind the scenes, it's actually only one component of the dog, and it has a lot of SVG inside of it, and the SVG is split into different pieces. So let's see actually how it looks. So we have the mochi box that contains the types of the dogs, and we see that we are passing props to it, like left eye open, left ear flat, etc., etc. On the left bottom side, we can see a piece of the CSS that describes, depending on what classes do this mochi box has, how to show and hide specific parts of the SVG. And on the bottom right, we can see the props that we can accept to generate the different variations of dogs. So we have the props, we have the calculation of the style classes depending on the props. Here we apply the different CSS classes, and then we just show the all SVG with some of the parts are hidden and some of the parts are visible. We can use SVG for micro interactions, and as you can see in this specific example, I don't think that it will be very easy to achieve the same animations or the same interactions using HTML and CSS. So, I mean, Most of the UI frameworks that I know implement those or part of their animations using plain HTML and CSS. But up until now, I didn't encounter any framework, any UI framework that uses SVG for creating those kind of animations. And in the same field, so we have non-standard UI elements. I mean, behind the scenes, all of those, or 3 of those, are just a simple checkbox, and 1 of it is just a radio group. So you see that with a little bit of SVG, we can achieve very different interfaces and very different UI elements that, again, play the same way as a simple checkbox or a simple radio button or whatever. And of course, one of the painful things that I see on the web still is logos. So we are in 2020. I don't see any actual reason today to create your logo for your website with a different format than SVG. No PNGs, definitely not animated GIFs, and God forbid, no JPEG files. And I mean, it's very simple. If you use any other format, let's say you use PNGs, okay? PNGs, it's pretty good. So you need to create PNGs at least in 2 sizes, one for regular displays and one for Retina displays. And if your website is responsive, so you definitely don't want to use your, 200 by 200 logo or on a placeholder of 15 on 15 pixels. So it just loses space and just bad practice to do kind of stuff like that. But with SVG, you gain, first of all, you can, it's responsive. I mean, never mind what size you're gonna draw the SVG, it will be crisp, and the size of it probably in most cases, it will be less than PNGs and definitely less than JPEGs. And it's future proof. I mean, in a couple of years, we're gonna have 8K displays. You don't need to add another logo file to your media queries. You can just live with the same SVG that you created today. It will be still great and crisp and sharp. So of course, when talking about logos, I mean, you can definitely create animated logos. SVG is a great format to do it, and it's very easy to do an animated logo with a bit of CSS. Or JavaScript, it depends what type of animations or interaction you want your logo to have. So another cool trick about SVG in general, but in relation to logos, is that you can add media queries directly inside the SVG file. So I mean, when you add an SVG to your website and it has media queries inside of it, so you can set different sizes, different widths or heights, depending on where the SVG is located, and it will just change, as you can see in this specific animation. The cool thing about it is it's inside the SVG file. So I mean, if someone downloads your logo from your website, you know, like just right-clicking and save image as or whatever, the media query stays inside of it. So if the person uses your logo in a large box or in a small box, it will show differently according to what you intended it to look like. So we can of course create cool text effects with SVG. Some of it it's just basic SVG, and some of it uses filters inside of SVGs. And one of the simplest that I like is this one on the bottom left. When I'm writing, it's a really nice and subtle effect of just highlighting my actual text. We can of course use SVGs for art. I mean, there are different kind of arts, so It can be just illustrations or animations that you add on your website or on your products. By the way, SVG works great not only on the web, also on mobile platforms. And you can just create art with it. I mean, you can draw, you can animate, you can create interactions, and in some cases you can even create full games using SVG. So when talking about art, there are different kind of arts. One of them is, one of my favorite is generative art. And there is this cool artist called Andrew, and he creates those amazing stuff, as you can see in this current slide. If you go to his website, he has like, I don't know, hundreds of different variations of those stuff. Something that we can't ignore, we can create loaders. So I know there is a lot of loader libraries and a lot of CSS loaders and a lot of different variations of loaders, but creating loaders with SVG probably will be the best case, because even from the simple loader that you're doing, just a simple spinner, you can level it up to loaders similar to what you can see in this current slide. Those specifically were created for Google. And we can do the line drawing effect. So I'm pretty sure that you encountered this effect on the web at least a couple of times in the past years. It's getting more and more common because it's so easy to create it. I mean, one of the coolest that I saw, it's an example by Lemonade that you see. It's like a huge line that follows you when you scroll your page, and just draws those cute figures or animations during your sliding the page. Okay, so filters and effects. On the left side, we can see a broken filter. I mean, it's not called broken, but it's a live text that applied on it SVG filter that adds a distortion map. And it's really cool effect because it's a live text again. You can just write whatever you want and you get the distorted effect on it. On the right, you can see a very basic implementation of, let's imagine we have a online store and we want to show different colors of our t-shirt. So we don't have to picture our model, I don't know, 10 or 20 or 30 times. We can just add a SVG object on top of the image and allow our users to change the color. It can be with a preset, it can be with a color picker as in this specific example, but the idea, I guess, is pretty simple. Okay, so interactive infographics. So infographics, they don't have to be interactive, but interactivity is a very crucial part, in my opinion. So in this one, we see an infographic for Tour de France. And the cool thing is that it's almost all of it built with Vue. And the Vue with the reactivity is incorporated inside the SVG object. So if you can see on the example on the bottom left, we have the wheels, we have the chain, we have the navigation, and everything is inside the SVG object. So it's really easy to create infographics in that specific way. Okay, a couple of things that some of you, I guess, did not know about SVG is one of them is you can use links directly inside of SVG files. And the cool thing is when I'm using my mouse, the hover effect is directly on the paths and on the shapes inside of the SVG. It's not bounded to the bounding box of the whole image. So like on the example on the left with the diamond, when my mouse pointer is on the specific part of the diamond, only then I can see the hover effect, and only this part of the SVG is actually clickable. We can be very creative with SVG. we can use SVGs as, directly SVG code with a little bit of escaping directly as a background image, and we can control it in a very cool way, as exactly as you see in the current slide. I have a background image and I have a URL that is directly in the SVG code with some of the characters escape, and I can just change the text inside of my SVG, and it's a background image. I can apply all of the background image properties that I want, like repeat and background scale, etc., etc. It's a very cool trick that I learned recently from Lea Viru. And another one, actually, that came as an idea from Lea Viru. Recently, we can use SVGs for favicons. So with this very simple code that you can see here, we are adding a favicon to our website, and it's actually an SVG file and the text inside of it, text element. And inside of the text element, I'm using an emoji. So I'm actually showing an emoji, a real emoji, as my favicon on my website, which is really cool. We can just be creative with SVGs in a totally amazing ways. For example, this Check Studio, the example on the bottom right, the faces are very simple SVG files, and if I remember correctly, it's actually was created with Lottie files, and it just follows the people, like the people that work in that creative studio. It just follows your mouse cursors, or on the bottom left, you can see how we are using SVG to create very non-regular design tooltips. And of course, we can just create a full-blown websites with totally SVG. As you can see in this specific example, it's a website that made almost entirely with SVGs. The background, the animations, etc., etc. It shows specifically the presidents of the United States, and all the animations, almost all the buttons inside this website are made totally with SVGs. Okay, so what tools do we have to create our SVGs? We have a lot of tools. Almost any vector graphic software can export SVG, and some of them even can export the animations. If you're using After Effects in combination with Lottie files, you can, it's a plugin for After Effects. You can export your SVG animations as a JSON file and then just use it inside your websites. It's really cool and not so difficult to do it. And of course, we can do it just by ourselves and just write all the code. So in this specific example, I have this little box that is animated. Let's set it up. And I have my view application. I have the box component, and I'm passing two props, the color and the size. And inside the box, I have a very simple SVG element that I'm using views reactivity to pass the props of the size, the height, and the stroke, etc. to it. And I'm using GreenSock, which is a huge and very cool addition, not just for SVG, but in general for animations. It's very simple to create this basic animation. I'm creating a GreenSock timeline, and then on this timeline, I'm adding very basic animations of the component box. And I'm saying, okay, go to X position of 250 and rotate by 90 degrees. That's pretty much, it's very simple. Okay, so what's next? SVG and virtual reality, I actually don't know. Maybe. It depends on you. It depends if you start or continue using SVG and continue pushing the limits of it. So maybe SVG in VR. Okay, a quick recap. Why should we use SVG? It's resolution independent. It doesn't matter what resolution you're showing it. You can stretch it, squeeze it, or whatever. It will be perfectly exactly as you intended it to be, and crisp and sharp on every display, by the way. It's a syntax. SVG is XML based and you can read it, so you probably can understand it if you can read it. The file size. In most cases, when using SVG correctly and even optimizing it, you can reduce the file sizes dramatically, and the lower the file size, we know the faster it loads. So it's pretty obvious. Okay, so it's multicolor. I mean, specifically if I'm taking only the icons example, so using an icon system based on SVG or using an icon system based on icon fonts, for example. So SVG wins only, not only, but the first win point for SVG is that it's multicolor, something that I can't do with icon fonts. It's animatable and scriptable. I mean, you can add animations on top of SVG files, and inside of the SVG elements, you can animate them, you can add scripts to them, you can interact with them. It's definitely very easy to achieve those kind of effects and create from the simplest animations that you can just code by hand to the most complex one that you can use tools like, as I said, After Effects or SVG Gator or whatever. Browser support. So SVG is pretty old. It's supported by all browsers and probably will be supported by all the new versions. And it's like more than, I think, 15 years old, which is amazing. And we're not using it enough. It has a better accessibility, and it supports search engine optimization. I mean, you can add ARIA inside of SVGs, and search engines can read SVGs, pretty simple. It's semantically correct. I mean, SVG it's an image eventually. So if you're thinking about, okay, I need to add something here inside my website that will be animated and show some stuff. Okay, so why should I use HTML and CSS that are intended for other stuff? No, I probably need an image, so SVG is an image. Ease of use. I mean, you can create SVGs by hand, just write it, or you can use lots and lots of tools to create SVGs and just draw them with your vector graphic software. My key takeaway from all this talk is, if you're thinking of solving any issues, one of the questions you should ask yourself is, maybe I should use SVG for that. Thank you very much, guys.